Sometimes this particular subject can be, our understanding of it and our dealing with it can be enhanced if people share their experiences. Most of us have had experiences in giving, forgiving, or being forgiven, or not forgiving, or we've dealt with the issue. Most of us have dealt with the issue. Sometimes people will enrich this discussion by sharing some of their experiences. I would like to suggest a covenant among us that says that whatever is said in this room stays in this room. It is not judged and it is not discussed outside this room, in order that our experiences and viewpoints can be perhaps less inhibited. On the other hand, I'm not encouraging anyone to share anything that you're not comfortable sharing. We all have name tags with our names on the front, and this guy has God on the front of his, and I'm not quite sure I'm buying this, but would you give us your name, your church affiliation, and one sentence with the word forgive or forgiveness or forgiving or whatever in it?
Yeah, my name is Wes Tessie. I'm the pastor at East Otto United Methodist Church in East Otto. We need to work on forgiveness.
Don't we all?
I must have my name tag in my truck.
Okay, all right. Hey, if you can convince people that's your name tag, good for you. Good for you. Okay, we start off talking about daring to forgive. When we use the word dare, there's something implied. If I dare you to do something, it implies something about the thing I'm daring you to do. What is the implication you would draw? If I dare you to go have lunch, or if I dare you to walk up to the road, that wouldn't make any sense. It only makes sense under certain conditions. And what conditions would that be?
Something difficult.
Something difficult, and who said dangerous? Something dangerous, something difficult. Okay, and I think probably it's more from the standpoint of some kind of a risk.
Mm-hmm.
It may not be life-threatening dangerous, but when we were kids, we would dare somebody to say something to a teacher, and watch them get sent to the principal's office. We might dare somebody to walk on top of a railing, and of course, obviously, there's a risk that they'll fall off. So there's an implication here when we say dare to forgive that, well, wait a minute, is there a risk associated with forgiving? Is there?
Sometimes there's an act of humility. Nobody wants to humble themselves sometimes.
So you risk humbling yourselves, which we men really don't be a whole lot about. I mean, we're kind of proud of our manhood, and humbling oneself is not particular. So there's a risk of being even humiliated, or perceived to be humiliated in forgiving. Is there any other risk associated with forgiving?
Risk that they might not accept forgiveness.
Rejection.
Rejection, yeah.
I forgive you. Well, I don't care if you forget. I don't want you to forgive me. I didn't do anything wrong in the first place. So you reach out, you humble yourself, you try to forgive somebody, and the attitude of the person, it just complicates the process of, not only being humble, but humiliated by their attitude and the response that you would get. Okay, so there is a risk associated. Can you think of anything else that we risk when we dare to forgive?
Kind of the risk of letting go of it. Because if you forgive someone truly, then you can no longer hold it against them.
And we don't want to necessarily let go of something, especially if it's been very painful, very hurtful. And I'm not sure I want to just let that go. No. So, there is a risk, or there are risks associated with that. What is forgiveness, and what is it not? We use the word, we throw it around, it's in the scriptures, but we say forgive, and I don't think we always mean the same thing, and I think there are people who are reluctant to forgive because they may think it means something else. So let's talk about what does forgiveness mean? And I'm speaking in the context of human forgiveness. You know, us forgiving somebody else. We don't have to spend a lot of time talking about God forgiving us, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. So, what is forgiveness?
Not holding something against somebody when they wronged us. I mean,
Okay, somebody has wronged us.
somebody's wronged us, and we don't say, hold. We still want the best. We still love them and want the best for them. We don't want to retaliate, in a sense.
That's pretty easy, isn't it?
No, not at all.
Somebody has hurt us badly, maybe still hurting us, maybe constantly hurting us, and you say we do what?
We don't want to retaliate.
We
We
don't
don't
want
hold
to
it against
retaliate,
them.
we don't want to hold it against them. See, that almost seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? Anybody else? What is forgiveness and what is forgiveness not? If we forgive a person, does that mean that everything goes back to the way it was? If I have entrusted you to something, if I've trusted a loved one, I've trusted a wife, a family member, and I forgive them, then we just go back, rewind, and go back to where we were?
Takes time. Takes time.
Huh?
It takes time to heal that process.
Okay.
Accept it.
Well, do we go back to where we were? Does forgiveness mean pretend it never happened?
We don't forget.
We don't forget. Well, I don't know. I heard somebody in an earlier class saying we should forget.
Yeah, we should.
Could both of you be right? How could both of you be right? Do we forget when we forgive, or do we not forget?
I think there's times, some things that I forgive that I probably do forget about.
Yeah, okay.
And there are other things, so I think it depends. There are other things that I think I've forgiven, but I don't forget.
Okay.
So I think it's kind of, I'm thinking of unconditional love for some reason. I mean, when I think of forgiveness, if you have that unconditional love for someone, you forgive them.
Okay.
I mean, I just love that person so much that I'm not going to hold whatever it is against them.
Is that appropriate? Is unconditional love, does that figure into the forgiveness and our willingness to forgive? And do we forget? Some things you say you forget, some things you remember. Can you do both?
Yeah, I would say the forgetting is more if the issue that needed forgiveness wasn't a learning experience. And
Okay.
then, like, if I needed to forgive someone that wronged me, but I need to not allow that to happen again in the future,
Okay.
I need to not forget that.
Mm-hmm.
Not particularly holding it against that person, but just in the life experience. If I trusted so-and-so with anything and it went down the wrong way, I need to remember that that's probably not the best way to go about it. Or
So you use it as a learning experience. We do say forget because if I forgive you, but every time something reminds us of it, it just sort of
brings it back up.
comes back up. Well, so in that sense, I think the verb forget works real well. It's gone, it's over, it's behind us. But if you borrowed $10,000 from me and you didn't pay it back and you had no intention of paying it back, I'll forgive you because maybe I know you can't pay it back or whatever. But I'm not going to forget it. So the next time you come and say, "Oh, John, can I borrow a little more money from you?" And so we forget. I think we do both. Would you agree with that? So it is not somebody does harm to you, should they be punished? I mean, somebody, oh, let's look at the case up in Buffalo. The fellow was thrown down the stairs, he died. Should his family be saying, well, don't have a trial, don't punish him?
No.
Justice has to be served, I think, but, because you break the law, the family could forgive them, but the person that did the injustice has to pay the consequences of his actions.
So forgiveness is not absolution. Forgiveness is not amnesty. Forgiveness is, okay, I am not wishing you evil, I'm not trying to get even with you, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen. And it doesn't mean that there isn't an issue of justice to be considered. If we have time, we may talk a little bit more about the idea of justice and even the criminal justice system. What do the scriptures tell us about forgiveness?
I mentioned it earlier, that
Okay.
Lord's Prayer even says, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us.
Yeah, all my life until I got to the point where I couldn't do it anymore, it didn't bother me too much. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive others. I interpreted that, not maliciously, I was ignorant. I interpreted that, okay, God forgive me. And by the way, I understand if you forgive me, I'm supposed to forgive others. But Jesus clarified that, and I didn't read that part. What did Jesus tell us?
The same measure you use to forgive others is a measurement that God will use to forgive you.
That is in the scriptures, and I recognize it. But
If you
there's
do
one
not-
right after the Lord's
If
Prayer.
you do not forgive others their trespasses, neither will your Father in heaven forgive you.
Exactly. Like, this is not an option. This is not, yeah, you do it, and then we'll do it. It is, you don't forgive others, my heavenly Father will not forgive you. Is that your understanding? So if we want God to forgive us, and forgiveness is a huge part of Christianity. I mean, John the Baptist came in talking about repentance and seeking forgiveness. All through the New Testament, you're hearing about Jesus at the Lord's Supper talking about for the forgiveness of sin. So, in Christianity, forgiveness is huge. And yet Jesus is saying, if we don't forgive others, he didn't say, God may not forgive you, or God will look askance. He said, no, he won't forgive you. And then he tells a story that follows that. He tells a little parable about some servants. Anybody remember that? Right after he tells us that God won't forgive us if we don't forgive others, he illustrates his point. Anybody remember that story?
Parable of the unmerciful servant.
Thank you. And just very briefly, what is that? What's that story?
The king called in the collection. Somebody owed lots and lots of money, more than we can imagine. And he begged for mercy, and the king said, well, the king had every right to collect that, to throw him into prison, but the king said he would forgive him. Well, then he forgave all his debts. And the guy went out and found somebody that owed him a couple bucks by comparison. And he actually grabbed the guy by the neck and he demanded his money. Give me my couple bucks. And then he actually had the guy thrown into prison because the guy couldn't pay him. And, that's the gist of the story. The king got angry and he heard about it. And,
He withdrew his forgiveness.
yeah.
Okay. So, there's no ambiguity about the story and about what Jesus is saying here. What else in the scriptures do we think of when we look at the subject of forgiveness? Any other scriptures come to mind? powerful. Jesus has been tortured, humiliated. He's in the process of being killed. He's hanging from some nails. He's got a wound in his side. And by the way, the crucifixion, if you really delve into it, is one of the most excruciating forms of torture to death. And he's not saying it later. He's not saying it after he resurrected. He's hanging there and he's saying, what does he say?
Father, forgive them, right? They know not what they do.
That's pretty powerful, isn't it?
Yes.
There are a number of scriptures that tell us that we are supposed to forgive. I think we've hit the main ones. Peter asked Jesus about forgiveness. You know, you forgive somebody and then they come back, they do it again. And you forgive them and they come back and do something else to you. And Peter was saying, yeah, how long does this go on? And what did Jesus tell him?
70 times 7.
One version says 70 times 7. That's the one I like. There are different versions, but what is Jesus really saying when he gives a number?
Just keep on forgiving.
There is no limit. We are supposed to forgive forever. And there are many other scriptures. I could read you a couple. And whenever you stand praying, if you have anything against anyone, forgive him, that your Father in heaven may also forgive your trespasses. But if you do not forgive, neither will your Father in heaven forgive your trespasses. And then here's one that's very interesting. It says, love your enemies. Now, enemies are people. That's a biggie. Enemies don't like you and you don't like them. Love your enemies, do good and lend, hoping for nothing in return. And your reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High, for he is kind to the unthankful and evil. Therefore be merciful, just as your Father also is merciful. Judge not, and you shall not be judged. Condemn not, and you shall not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over, will be put into your bosom. For with the same measure that you use, it will be measured back to you. And there are many other places where we are given essentially the same message, both by Jesus and by the writers of the epistles. Okay, that's the Bible. The Bible sets forth ideals. The Bible sets forth standards for us. This is the real world. We really going to forgive any and everything somebody can do to us? John McCain was held in prison for 5 years. People have had their family members brutalized and killed. People have had all kinds of things that are done. 9/11. Are we going to forgive everything? Does Jesus expect us to forgive everything? What do you think? Can we forgive everything?
That's a part I have trouble with.
You have trouble with it?
Yeah, because I think sometimes we have a responsibility is to stand up, maybe not only for ourselves. I think sometimes you forgive and you forgive and you forgive, and then people take advantage of that. So there's a responsibility that sometimes I feel I'm not looking for control. I have trouble with this, I'm admitting.
Hey, I don't know why you're having trouble with it. Nobody else. Anybody else having trouble with it?
No, because
Of course, we all have trouble with it.
sometimes you feel like you have a responsibility. People are going to take advantage of that, you know. And I don't know if it makes a difference to you folks, but I don't feel that's right when if you forgive someone, they trample over you and they take advantage of it. You know, that's the part I.
Yeah. Well, now let's look at that. Somebody has done something to you and you forgive them. And they say, okay, I got a patsy here. I can go back and do things again. we talked about what forgiveness is and what forgiveness isn't. And I don't think forgiveness is not trying to protect yourself. And you can use any example you want to, whether it's physical, psychological, financial, or whatever. If we forgive someone, can we still protect ourselves? Let's use an example. Someone has physically injured you. Do we have to let them physically injure us again? Or can we know that this person is a threat and protect ourselves against them? Someone has not paid a debt. You don't have to lend them money again, right?
I think it's easier for when it affects us as individuals. It's more difficult when it affects people we love. You know, forgiveness for me to extend to somebody, like you're saying, I can forgive somebody and I know what to do to not let it happen again.
Yeah.
If they're hurting somebody I love, they may not know how to let. I may be able to forgive what happened to them, but I don't know how to protect them from that happening again.
Give us an example.
Well, I have a history with my wife and I being foster parents, and it's in previous families that we've dealt with, we've been highly involved with the families, and we were hoping to adopt this one kid, and it didn't happen, and it's really hard because I have to regularly forgive that family who's still kind of failing this 4-year-old boy, but it's hard for me because it doesn't affect me anymore. I'm no longer legally responsible, but I can't do, I feel bad because I can no longer do anything to protect him from anything bad happening again. And it's not physical harm, it's, the love that he deserves isn't happening. You know he's going to grow up with issues, and he's going to have to figure out how to forgive these people later in life. And that's hard for me because I want to be able to do something to resolve that. And I can forgive them, but I also can't do anything to change the situation.
Okay, and I think this gets a little bit beyond the scope of where we're going. It's a good illustration, but yes, we can forgive people, and it is harder if it's, somebody does something to my wife and my kids. I have a lot harder time forgiving them, but I again am suggesting that forgiveness should not. I'm putting this out here for your thoughts. Okay, I forgive you. Does that limit my efforts to protect the third person or myself against future actions? I can forgive you. Let's say I forgive someone who has injured a child that I care about, or my own child. Does that mean that I don't want to see them prosecuted, that I wouldn't participate in the prosecution of them if they committed a crime? Is that inconsistent with forgiveness? What do you think? So what I think we're saying is that forgiveness perhaps increases our vulnerability some by definition, depends on the situation. But I don't believe, and I welcome somebody to illustrate that I'm wrong, but I don't believe forgiveness should diminish our ability to defend a third person, ourselves, to prosecute and seek justice, or any of those things. Do any of you see forgiveness as making us more vulnerable? Emotionally, yes. The examples that we gave earlier, you're more vulnerable. You're more vulnerable to somebody think you're a coward, that you should have stood up, that you're weak, all of those things. But in terms of being vulnerable to having the same thing happen to you again, I have trouble thinking of a situation where that would be true. I would forgive someone who has hurt me or hurt somebody I love, I hope. But it wouldn't stop me from trying to do everything in my power to protect myself against that person doing something more to hurt, especially a third person.
I think we might for me, I get stuck there sometimes because then I don't know how to act towards that person. You know what I mean? I forgive you, but I don't particularly know how to interact with you anymore. You know,
Okay.
like and maybe it's a broken relationship. I don't know, but if somebody offends me or does something, I feel like I can forgive them if I don't have to see them much anymore. If they've done something to really offend me or that requires forgiveness, but I still have to see them a lot, and in my head the relationship has changed.
Mm-hmm.
That, I think, is maybe where we as believers get a little stuck is, okay, the relationship obviously changed, and I no longer know the proper way to act in forgiveness, but in relationship.
Okay, anybody got any thoughts about it? Somebody's done something, may still be doing things or trying to do things to hurt you at work or in your neighborhood. They're continuing to do things, or what they did was so bad that what you thought might have been a friendship or a collegiality, hey, I don't have anything to do with that. What are your thoughts?
I think it was mentioned earlier, it was a learning process sometimes with forgiveness, like somebody you're familiar with and you know what they did to you and you forgive them, but you're not going to try to let it happen again in the same way because you're going to make sure you aren't as vulnerable maybe. I don't know if that's considered forgiveness, but it's you try to change your way you deal with a person, for instance.
I think most of us do now. If you take the stories that you read about and hear about, the responses are different. One person I know who suffered an injury from having a drunk driver kill somebody close to them, he did not try to make contact with he forgave the person, but he had no occasion to deal with the person, so they went their separate ways. There are people who feel a need to try to separate themselves. There are other people, especially in one-time incidents like that, where they actually seek reconciliation. The widower of a murder victim who actually goes to the murderer who is in jail and seeks reconciliation and achieves it. There are so many, each situation is different. But I have not read anything or thought anything about forgiveness that doesn't conform to the idea that, okay, I forgive you, but the less I have to do with you, the further we stay apart, the better we like it. I'm a mediator, and sometimes I've had situations where people are mediating. Sometimes they're family members or neighbors. And very often the mediation agreement will actually say that they will avoid each other because they think that they recognize that they're better able to achieve whatever they have agreed to if they stay away from each other. And that is actually being included in the agreement that they reach, which may or may not, in different cases, be forgiveness, but it is at least a resolution of the dispute. Okay. What do you think the response would have been if on 9/12 you found yourself in church saying that we should forgive the perpetrators of 9/11? How do you think your colleagues in the church would have reacted? If you were a preacher or giving a talk, and that was the nature of it, you were talking about forgiveness, and you were saying a primary example would be we should forgive these people. What kind of reaction would you expect? talk about Scripture, the Bible it's an ideal. It's in most of the teachings of the Bible, the commandments. But in the real world, what is the issue of forgiveness like?
It's like Toby Keith's country song here about it. He said after that, he says, you know, we'll put a boot in your butt. It's the American way.
There is something about our culture, there's something about our gender, there's so much that forgiveness is generally not the first thing that comes to mind when somebody does something particularly offensive or atrocious, threatening, humiliating. Okay, somebody does something. However bad you want to make it, however not bad you want to make it. You have a choice to forgive or not to forgive. What is the effect of withholding forgiveness on the person who committed the act and on you? What is the effect of withholding forgiveness on the person that you might have forgiven but didn't? And what is the effect on you?
Doesn't affect them at all.
Well, if you're in a position to, you might.
Well, there's you
Yeah.
could,
But
yeah, for the most part,
For the most part,
if we
yeah.
harbor it, it's more of a bitterness in ourselves. That, I mean, our pastor preached on it in the sense of, I don't know if it was Buddha or somebody, but it's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die.
Okay, you've heard that too.
Yeah,
I used it in the last session.
yeah, where you hold it in and it's. I
That's
mean,
right. It's like taking poison and wishing the other person, expecting the other person to die when we withhold forgiveness. So let's make it easy. Somebody does something really bad to you, you know you need to forgive them. Piece of cake, right? I mean, they have really hurt you. They may have killed somebody you love. They may have injured somebody you love. They may have humiliated you. They may have done you name it. You know all the things that people do to each other. Are you really supposed to forgive anything anybody does to you? Does Jesus expect you to do that? Does God expect you to do that? God the Father?
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
I think it's more what you said too about, I'm thinking about the cleansing for yourself. You're releasing that for your own self, you know. As I'm thinking of this song by Matthew West called Forgiveness. I don't know if you guys know that or anything, but it's talking about you know, when you forgive somebody else, yourself, you get the cleansing and stuff inside. So you know your conscience, you get a clear conscience and everything's like a burden's lifted off of you.
So no matter what anybody does to me, I should forgive it, and I'll be better off.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
I don't think we remember how much we've been forgiven ever.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's my human flaw. So when somebody wrongs me, I'm like, how dare you? Instead of stopping to that's when you talk about this, everything I keep hearing in my head is, well, only by the power of God can I actually forgive this person. But then it stops me to say, well, what have I been forgiven for? And if I made a list of that, I don't care how bad someone's is, I gotta feel at least a little bit okay with, if I admit, I don't know, I think that's our flaw as men, and that's where the pride comes in, not only in not wanting to forgive somebody because of the humility or whatever it would take, but is our pride is that I'm a pretty good person, and they killed my wife or something, you know, well.
Why do I deserve this? In other words, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That kind of thing. We think that we are good as Christians maybe, and they're bad, but we forget how much God has forgiven us. But we've been forgiven of.
I want to read you a definition of forgiveness. There are many. You may not like this one. It's certainly not that much better than others you might have read. But I'll tell you where it came from after I read it. Forgiveness defined: when unjustly hurt by another, we forgive when we overcome the resentment toward the offender, not by denying our right to the resentment, but instead by trying to offer the wrongdoer compassion, benevolence, and love. As we give these, as we as forgivers realize that the offender does not necessarily have the right to such gifts. And this was written by Dr. Robert Enright, who's the founder of, you'll be pleased to know it exists, the International Forgiveness Institute. And he has been studying this issue and doing things with forgiveness for 25 years. You like that definition? Does it work for you? Does it raise any questions in your mind? So, I have several advocates for forgiveness, no matter how bad, how atrocious the transgression might be. What examples do we have in the Bible of spectacular forgiveness? We mentioned one, Christ hanging on the cross.
When the thief was hanging on the cross next to Christ, he asked for forgiveness.
Okay? Any others?
Apostle Paul. The Apostle Paul.
The Apostle Paul, good example. What about from the Old Testament? Remember Joseph? In the Technicolor Code? I don't think the Bible called it that. Remember his story?
Yeah. He forgave his brothers.
He did. He forgave them.
David.
What about contemporary stories of forgiveness?
Corey Ten Boom, remember?
Who?
Corey Ten Boom, she forgave her Nazi prison guard persecutor from World War II.
Okay. Any others come to mind?
I remember a few years back when the Amish community suffered a tragic loss, a gunman come in, something like that.
A gunman
Yeah.
went into the school and very deliberately killed a number of the school children, all female. This was in 2006. One of them schoolhouse. Interesting story. Two of the kids realized what was happening. Two of the girls, one 13 and one 11. And they asked that they be killed, that the others be spared. Interesting. I hadn't heard that before. I did some research on this. He did. He shot them both. One died, one did not. But one man was quoted as saying, "I don't think there's anybody here that wants to do anything but forgive and not only reach out to those who have suffered a loss in that way, but to reach out to the family of the man who committed the acts." And that's exactly what the Amish did. They reached out to the family. The man himself was dead. They reached out to the family and were supportive of the family. That makes the newspapers. It's pretty spectacular. Any others that come to mind? Any other examples of forgiveness that are noteworthy in our experience? Yes, sir. Welcome.
Hi. Sorry I'm late.
That's all right. We're glad you're here. Your
Thank
name is Jeff Ward.
Ward, right, yeah.
And you're from what church?
Bemis Point United Methodist.
Bemis Point. And why don't you give us a sentence with the word forgive or forgiveness in it? That's what everybody else had to do.
Oh, okay. I think then what I'll share is that my life verse is Luke 7:47. He who has been forgiven much loves much.
I like it. Okay, any other contemporary examples of forgiveness that come to mind and perhaps serve as an inspiration for us? Have you ever heard of truth and reconciliation committees or groups or boards or whatever they call them? There was one in South Africa. There's one in Canada going on dealing with the treatment of Native American, Native First Nation children some years ago by the Canadian government. Truth and Reconciliation, where people form an organization and have a process that is intended to promote forgiveness. One of the interesting things about forgiveness, or the lack thereof, lack of forgiveness has a legacy. And if you look around the world today, you will find that there is a lot of hostility that has nothing to do with anything that's going on today. It is historic. This group of people did something to this group of people. The Hatfields and McCoys illustrate the point. But it happens in the Middle East. It happens all over the world that people are killing each other because of what happened or was perceived to have happened earlier, some time ago. Is there a place for forgiveness in the criminal justice system?
Yes.
Thank you. How does forgiveness fit in with, coexist with, affect the criminal justice system? Or how does forgiveness and our attitude toward the criminal justice system, how do they interact?
I don't know how it comes about it, but for the first time, when we did our background checks before, they came out with this New York State form, something or other, but it's about rights for convicted persons, where it goes on to say in there that you can't deny employment to someone with 2 convictions or serve prison time. It's not a basis for sole denial, unless that position involves direct contact with all state youth, or the position would require you to be trustworthy.
So one way we have an effect is that we have enacted laws that have tried to give some degree of forgiveness. Society is giving some degree of forgiveness to people who have perpetrated a crime and who've paid the price. They've been convicted and they paid the price, and we're saying, okay, let's let what I would suggest, at least is something like forgiveness, affect our way of treating these people. What are some of the other thoughts?
I don't know, my opinion, but it seems like criminal justice is more about fairness.
Yeah.
And Jesus forgiving us of our sins is anything but fair.
Is what?
Anything but fair.
Okay. So how do those two things coexist?
I don't know, law and grace.
Well, we were talking earlier about what forgiveness is and is not. And I think we concluded, and I'm ready to be corrected, but I think we concluded that we can forgive someone and not necessarily,
We're not saying it's right.
big word,
And not say that it's right, what they did is right.
not saying it's what they did is right, not saying that they should not be held responsible for what they did. You can forgive someone for committing a crime and still say, fine, we forgive them, and yet we put them in jail. Is that inconsistent? Can we love somebody and put them in jail?
Sometimes it's the most loving thing you can do.
Sometimes what?
It's the most loving thing you can do to protect them from themselves.
That's okay. There are
Protect others from it too.
and protect others from it. Because we said that forgiving someone should not necessarily make us move forward to their repeated our society some differences in attitude. You will see people who are trying to enact laws that say, fine, people should pay the price, but we should try to be fair in a way that also shows some compassion and some latitude. But generally speaking, I think the attitudes that manifest themselves are very dramatic. One is, do we care about prison conditions? Do we care about prison ministries? Do we care if our criminal justice system is indeed fair, which it is not, but there are efforts to make it so. But do we care? Because in many cases, we're not even dealing with forgiveness. We're dealing with people who have not even committed a crime. So, as those who would forgive and who believe the scriptures that tell us to forgive and who think forgiveness is the way to go, it may be that we want to be more aware of what's done in our name in terms of the criminal justice system, which is unfair. I don't say that as someone who thinks it's somebody else's fault is unfair. I'm smart enough to make it fair. It's difficult to make it fair, but it is unfair, and I don't think anybody would disagree with me on that. Now, what you run into is, do we care about prison conditions? And then we have some really dramatic demonstrations of forgiveness. You've got convicts who are guilty. Society has declared that they're guilty. What about capital punishment? What about our attitude toward capital punishment? And then we get some real interesting ones. Because, okay, if you believe in capital punishment, that's one thing. Do you party to celebrate capital punishment? People do, you know. There are parties that are held to celebrate executions. And something that really blew my mind is when I found out that in Utah they have brought back the firing squad. Okay, you may like that, you may dislike it, we can disagree, I agree. They don't use professional executioners on the firing squad. They use volunteers. If you want to be on the firing squad in Utah, you fill out documents and volunteer to shoot people to death. They have an overwhelming number of people who volunteer to do this. I don't know if that disturbs you. It disturbs me. It somehow seems to be inconsistent with what we have studied in the scriptures and what we are finding in our real lives, that there are people who are celebrating executions and people who are volunteering for the privilege of executing a fellow human being. I don't know. Anybody feel differently about it? Do you have any feelings about it?
I wasn't aware of it.
Hmm?
I wasn't aware of it.
No, I don't think many people are. I dig up stuff like this. Any thoughts? I would suggest that we can think in terms of forgiveness in the criminal justice system, and that we agreed earlier forgiveness does not preclude treating people justly, holding people accountable. It does not suggest that we absolve people or grant amnesty to people. But I think it does suggest that we treat people humanely and that we care and that we look at people who transgress as fellow human beings. We pray, for example, to the victim. We pray for the victim of a crime or an accident as a result of negligence. Do we pray for the perpetrator of the crime or the person who was negligent? Should we?
Yes.
I mean, it's reflexive. We We look at the victims, yes. We commiserate with them. We have empathy for them. But the Amish that were mentioned earlier had concern about the family of the perpetrator of the massacre. And I suspect if the man had lived that they would have shown him also forgiveness, and that they would have taken the attitude that, yes, he did something terrible, but we can at least pray for that person. Okay, we're almost through. I'd like to make a couple of comments. I'll welcome any comments that you might choose to make. I think we agree. God tells us unequivocally, unambiguously, He commands us to forgive. Why does He tell us to forgive? It's probably like most of the commandments. He does this in a very selfish way. God is looking out. He wants things to happen His way, right? Why does God command us to do things?
He wants what's best for us.
Oh,
As
okay.
His children. Forgiveness benefits us when we forgive somebody. It not just them, it benefits us maybe more than it does them.
God's commandments, and I dare you to find one that doesn't conform. God's commandments are not for God's. God is omniscient. God is omnipotent. God's commandments are what is best for us. And He commands us to forgive because He knows we will be better off. So if we are to forgive, and we find it difficult, and we do find it difficult, we find 9/11 difficult, we find torture difficult, we find people who abuse children difficult, how do we forgive them? What's the first thing we got to do?
Pray for them. Pray for them.
First thing you got to do, unless you've got some powers that I don't know about, is pray. Go to God. You told me to forgive. Help me to forgive. The first thing we got to do is go to God in prayer, talk to God, and listen to God. You know, we often talk to God, but we don't often listen to God. So we pray. That's the first thing we do. And then, with God's help, can we not forgive? With God's help, and having heard Jesus on the cross in excruciating pain, being humiliated, killed, and tortured, who says, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do," what could you possibly not forgive? When you stop and think about it that way. Will it be easy? Will it be a reflective response when people do terrible things? No. Can you do it? No. Can you and God do it? I'll leave that answer to you. Thank you for your attention. I would like to have someone pray for us as we depart, and we will end our session. That clock was not right. It faked me out the first time. So, would someone give us a benediction? Yes, sir.
Gracious Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you, Lord, for who you are, Lord. And we thank you for what we learned here today in this class. God, we know with your help, all things are possible, even forgiveness. And Lord, I just pray, Lord, that every person, family that's here today, God, I just pray, represented here today, I pray, Lord, that if there's anything that needs to be forgiveness, Lord, that they will go to you in prayer. And Lord, you see the whole situation, Lord God. As we ask for forgiveness from the other person or from you, Lord, you give us that cleansing flow, that healing balm of Gilead, Lord, that can really Wisconsin with his family. Bless the rest of this day. In Jesus'